utensil holder, right? Which is basically a large cylinder, just be on the countertop for wooden spoons and the such, right? And sometimes you want like an 8 to 10 inch cylinder, right? You don't want something too tall because then you can't see the short-ish implements. But yeah, you want it kind of wide so you can put a bunch of things in there and they can sort of flower out. So I'm going to center low and wide to get my bottom cylinder. I'm going to dive in and finish. And I'm going to put a fairly thin bottom on this, although for the utility thing, a thick bottom, the advantage to a thick bottom is more mass and less tippy, right? So err on a thick bottom for the piece that you're making, right? We're going to go ahead and pry this open to the diameter that we want. We want something nice and wide. Use your hand to think about dimensions that you want for a piece. I have one at home that's a little bit wider than what I would like. I'd rather have it this diameter, but it's this diameter, but it's a pretty fancy one, so I'm keeping it. Yeah. I bought it at one of the Clay Creation pottery sales, which I need to have again soon. All right, so my bottom is taken care of. I have an air bubble in my bottom. Whoever wedged my clay. Oh wait, that was me. Stab that air bubble. All right, bottom is flat. I am not a stickler for a 90 degree down here, but if you want 90 degrees, you turn your fingernail into the wall and you get your little 90 degrees down all the way to the bottom. All right, step number 3 is done. Step number 4, tip your walls in, fix your rim. Step number 4 is done. Make your cylinder, set your moisture content on the inside, finger weights, push the clay out, thickness number 1. Set your moisture on the inside wall, finger weights, push clay out over that finger, thickness number 2. Now I think I'm at the thickness I want to stop at, especially when you're learning to do this technique, right? Don't go too thin, right? It's just going to be problematic for you. When you're stacking, we are not allowed to use torches in this studio. If you ever get an opportunity to throw in a studio, we're allowed to use fire. It's actually pretty amazing what you can do in an afternoon with a chunk of clay. I'm going to scrape the wet slurry off the outside, and I am also going to scrape the slurry off the rim, and I'm going to tip it at an angle. And I say an angle because I can tip it inward or I can tip it outward. I'm also spreading it out a little bit. There's a little flare on either side, the inside and the outside. And I'm going to set this bat aside and grab another bat.
There's one right there.
There's one right there. Awesome. So, three-way rings. All right. So this next chunk of clay is an arbitrary. Who the heck wedged that? An arbitrary size piece of clay. It doesn't matter what size this next chunk of clay is. You know, like when I'm doing my larger forms, I will sometimes put 20 pounds of clay down, right? And then I'll use 4 off the top of it, right? And then I just take the rest off and put it back in the bag. So get this on here, get that bottom edge. All right. It's spinning. Now technically, I don't need to center this whole chunk of clay, but it's a small enough chunk of clay that I'm going to go ahead and center the whole thing. You know, I got that top under control. The bottom is way out of whack. Make sure you're anchored to your body. Don't expect it to be centered on your first cone and dome. And especially if you did a terrible job wedging, don't expect it to be centered on your first cone and dome. If you are a terrible wedger, we should get you better at wedging. But while you're a terrible wedger, your cone should maybe get a little skinnier, right? When you're coning and doming. Like if I feel like my clay is fairly wedged, I won't make my cone very skinny because I don't need to do a lot of work because I've done a good job at the wedging table. All right, so we are now centered. Now we're going to make a cylinder off the top, off the hump. So I'm going to dive into an arbitrary depth and pry it open to about the width of my other cylinder. I don't care what's going on the bottom. I'm going to do a quick little step forward and get my walls under control and wobble free. And now I'm going to pull this to the approximate thickness or diameter of the piece that I have in front of me. Now when I'm doing this, I will often occupy two wheels and have my part making on one side and my assembly on the other side. All right, so measuring. You can use calipers for sure, but if you get used to using your hands, you can tell that that needs to be a little bit wider. I need to scrape the water off. This is a habit. It's not bad. This is a pre-shaping habit that we should have after we make our cylinder. Get that slurry off the outside so we can make all the decisions we want. This is sloping in. Now it matters which way I slope this. I want this one sloping out. So I'm going to tip this down on this side and have it sloping out. And now we're going to cut this off. So we've done the cut off the rim, right? When we have a wonky rim, we haven't maybe not done that. All right, that's something we need to work on, but something you're going to get here. So I'm going to put my first cylinder down. And this is why it's so nice to have two wheels, but so you can just move from one to the next. I'm going to take this off of here and set it down on top. And now I'm going to pull up that outer flare and push down that inner flare. And I'm just going to go around and I'm going to do a rough connecting. And you could be pretty far off on the sizes of your pieces and fix it at this point. Because you know the saying, wood is good, metal is better, but clay is the way. So we sort of knit these together roughly right now. I'm knitting I do this attaching together on the wheel. There is no reason you couldn't make a bunch of cylinders and sit down at the hand building table and attach them all. But to make it all nice and clean, I start off, I hold the rib still over my seam on the outside, and you're going to look on the inside here, camera person, and I am going to hold the rib here on the outside, and I'm going to slowly work down through that seam on the inside, and now I'm going to come up through that seam, and I've got that inside seam all nice and clean, and now I'm going to focus on the outside seam a little bit. And in reality, you can do a whole bunch of shaping right now while you're learning how to connect cylinders together like this. Keep it all very straight while you're getting used to connecting. But at this point, I would set my angle for my next piece. I guess I'm going to slope this one out, and then it's on to the next cylinder. And you can, if you want, be really aggressive and just like dive in and pry it open, fix your rim, and make more cylinder, right? I have a lumpy rim here, so what I'm going to do before I use this is I'm going to chop off the crummy part chop off the crummy part, set that aside, and then I am going to use this section here. Oop, I forgot to slope it. Yeah, we're gonna see what happens. But you can see I'm doing 2 or 3 inches at a time, right? And it's quite striking at how fast your piece will grow. Can you do 6 or 7 inches at a time after you know how? Probably, right? Do I do usually more than 8 inches? No, I do between 1 and 8 inches. 8 inches is like an extreme that I would do at a time. Why? Because if you do a big piece, it's a lot of mass pushing down on here. And while we're doing this connecting, it's really unorganized up there at the rim. And I'm pretty obsessive about keeping my rim under control when I'm building things, right? And that's because when it's spinning, you want lots of control up there. And while I'm putting something on, I don't want it so heavy that it's going to compromise my form down below while I'm doing this aggressive unspinning work on my piece. All right, so same move again, and this is what you're going to get to do over and over again. Hold the rib on the outside, work slowly down through that seam. And when I say when you're moving up and down, to get this done right, you need to move really slow right there at that action point there where the 2 pieces are coming together, and connect them together. At this point, you have a cylinder, and say this is as tall as you want it, right? You can, if you wanted to, you can start changing the shape of this and, bow it out and start forming. When I get to my seams, I usually have to do a little compression on the outside because I often haven't done an exact amount of work, but there, that's connecting pieces together. And you can finish it off with a leather.